before we even start to think about what kind of software we're using and get onto software interfaces, software features and how you control it, things like that, there's something really important that we need to discuss. And this is something that we don't really think about this day and age, because we're used to graphical user interfaces and we're used to tablets and we're used to a kind of a point and click mentality. So for example, we're used to either touching a screen or using a computer mouse. Now, the problem with screens and computer mice as control methods is it's very difficult to be precise. So if I was to just move the mouse a little bit, my cursor would actually move quite a lot. Yeah. Furthermore, if it was a touch screen and I was trying to touch on an exact pixel, unless I'm using a pen, I couldn't really do it because it's not that precise. So whilst mice and touch screens are great to be intuitive, and manufacturers of software kind of use them to help market their software to say, look, you don't need to learn how to use it, you just point and click. They are actually not great devices for being precise. Now, with mice, it's even more problematic because when we're using a mouse, our hand is fixed in a position. Now, whether this is a kind of okayish mouse like the one I've got or a lovely ergonomic gaming mouse, if it's our hand better, doesn't really matter. The issue is that our fingers and hand are in the same position. Now, obviously, if we've got a nice comfy mouse and a nice good surface, it might be easier to hold and easier to move around. But that's not the point. The point is that our hand is kept in this position. And when we're doing things precisely, such as using video editing software, usually our fingers are kind of tense and we end up on the mouse like that. So as we move the mouse around, we're actually moving around a tense hand, which isn't good for our well-being. Eventually, obviously, we can get things like RSI from repetitive strain. But going even further than that, if you just have a look at the position of your fingers and of your hand, in order to make very slight adjustments, for example, let's say we're trimming frame by frame with the mouse, we're constantly clicking with one or two fingers, and we're constantly doing very small, precise movements with the mouse. And this is very, very repetitive. Now, whilst it might be possible if you practice enough to try to relax your hand whilst you're doing this, it's easier said than done. It's very difficult to actually do. So, therefore, what we can deduce from that is that mice, as a control device for doing repetitive small tasks that are very precise, isn't very good from an operator's point of view. Yeah. And ultimately it can lead to repetitive strain injury in our hand. It can make it tiresome, and if it becomes tiresome or painful, chances are we're just not going to really bother to do it. We'll just think, oh, this is too difficult, I can't be bothered, it hurts, my hand hurts. Yeah. So this is where we kind of need to change our thinking approach a little bit. And I've got a lovely keyboard here that I'm going to use for a demonstration. So the alternative to a mouse when using video editing is to use a keyboard. Now, manufacturers kind of refer to these as keyboard shortcuts. You can learn them, you cannot learn them, depends if you want to use a shortcut or not. And the reason is that they don't want to overwhelm you by saying, oh my god, this is an alternative way of using our software. So they kind of make it seem as optional as possible. They also want to stick with the mouse, or if it's a tablet, maybe cursor control, because they think they can sell you the software easier. The software seems easier to use. Yeah, you don't need to learn how to use it, you just point and click. Yeah, so and you think, great, here's my money, I want to buy some software. But this is where the keyboard comes in. That's because although manufacturers don't really tell you this, and it's truer with some softwares more than others, the keyboard shortcuts aren't really keyboard shortcuts. They're trying to put a kind of slightly different spin on it to ease you into it. The keyboard control is an alternative control console for the software. And this, once we realize it, allows us to build muscle memory and move our hands around to press different keys without much effort, because once we're used to using it, it's a bit like touch typing or typing on a phone keypad. It becomes automatic. And also, we can be a lot more precise, yeah, because we're not either pressing a key or not pressing a key. We're not trying to move a mouse by a varying degree. And also, it means that our fingers, our hands, can keep moving around, yeah? Okay, and we can feel where the keys are, and we can press the keys. And indeed, the design of the keyboard controls for certain software is intended to actually make this easier to use. So it's up to you, obviously, whether you engage with it or not. But one of the main reasons that I'm doing this series of videos is to help people adjust to alternative ways, more professionally aligned ways, more craft editing approach ways for using the software. And the very first thing we need to do is to kind of see the mouse or cursors as having a place, but to see the keyboard as a viable alternative, or, depending on your point of view, something superior in terms of operating. Yeah. Now, I say superior, that's a claim that I make, and I'm going to explain myself a bit. If you have problems with controlling a mouse, yeah, moving it a tiny bit, or if you find it uncomfortable to grip and to repetitively move small amounts, or if you find it difficult to constantly see where on the screen your cursor is and what command you're clicking and what function you're on, this not only becomes overwhelming, but it almost makes the software seem inaccessible, especially if you have neurodivergence. Now, I have ADHD and ASD. If you have dyslexia, dyspraxia, dyscalculia, all these kinds of things, because of the way that the brain works differently, using a mouse to learn the complexities of controlling software is very, very, very complicated. Yeah. Even if manufacturers tell you, look, it's simple, you just point and click, and then you think, well, if it was that simple, why is my brain struggling with it? Whereby, if you're using something with keys or buttons, you can press them to control things. So I can either press a button or not press a button. Yeah. It's either on or off, and that makes it much, much easier to control certain functions. It's also possible, once you get used to it, if you like using multiple fingers to control things, for your fingers and the hand position to learn muscle memory, which means pressing certain functions becomes automatic once you're used to it, and you don't have to constantly think about it. At first, when you're getting started with the keyboard, yeah, you do have to think about it. It's the same with everything, yeah? You've got to go through that stage. But, for example, and this will lead into our first demonstration video of software. Take the J, K, and L keys. They are an alternative playback control mechanism for video. Now, although you can press and release those keys individually, they are intended to be used with 3 fingers hovering over the keys like that. This means that you can operate backwards and forwards, things like that, without looking at the keyboard, without looking where your cursor is on the video transport control, either progress bar, whatever you want to call it. And you can literally just focus on the imagery you're cutting. So it allows you to focus your mind on the things that are important. Yeah? And you might think, okay, but I constantly have to look down at the keyboard to see where the keys are. Well, thankfully the industry sorts of that, and we'll be discussing lots of things that can be done to help with that as well. Yeah, because remember, this is alternative. This is a totally different alternative approach to controlling software.